So hi, this is Quarantine Conversations number three. Um, this is going to be a Star Trek centric episode. We have a Star Trek super fan, Marina. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. Um, so we'll be talking about the philosophy of Star Trek and its inspiration. Maybe some stories you have from meeting the actors and the writers. Uh, I'm sure you have some. I've seen you. You have a lot of picks, a lot of. I mean, you get around. um,
Yes.
yeah, I've met several of them, but not quite as many as you, I don't think.
What can
So,
I say? You know what? It's
yeah,
addicting. Once you get on the convention circuit, you just want
yeah,
to keep going and going. And of course, given the current circumstances,
yeah.
it's a little bit selfish to say. So it's a bit of a bummer because obviously, the convention circuit for the year, for the convention season for the year is
Right.
basically shot,
Did they
unfortunately.
cancel Vegas?
Not yet. I mean,
Okay.
one by one, it seems to be going all very sequentially. So right now, I think majority of the June conventions are already out,
Okay.
and probably most of July.
Wow.
I mean, I still have a couple events, sort of like question marks, but they tend to be on the small one. Everything big is pretty much out. So
Yeah.
Vegas is upcoming, and I'm sure we'll hear something by June probably. But that's purely my
Wow.
guess, to be honest.
Vegas is the one convention I've not got to go to yet.
Oh,
I've been meaning to go since '06. I've had all kinds of things in life happen. I moved overseas, all kinds of things happen. So,
yeah.
I'm hoping to get there eventually.
It's
Um,
one of those events like it's definitely worth trying because it's in a
yeah,
class by itself. Thankfully, we do have other
right,
large Star Trek events such as Destination, for instance, both in Germany and in UK. I've
right.
been to the UK one. It's a very different experience. Both are great.
Mm,
It's just you may want to try apples, and you may want to try oranges, and it's great to
right.
try it because you get exposed to so many wonderful people. So
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense.
Hmm.
They used to have them like all the time, like in every city, and now it's like only Vegas in the US.
Yeah.
You know,
And every weekend,
so
as a matter of fact, I mean, those folks who used to go, say 20, 30 years ago, it
yeah,
used to be the norm to have lots of really small events happening pretty much all the time. And
yeah.
now we're sort of in the era of large, premier events, so to speak, So
Right.
we have Vegas and we have Destination. And I mean, there are others. I mean,
Well, I mean the
on
official
top
one.
of
I hope they bring it
on top
back.
of my head, I
Uh,
mean, lots of Comic Cons do invite. I mean, it varies depending where they are. There are some that are
right.
more track friendly, and then there are others that are a little bit less.
Yeah,
But for the most part, we still get plenty of exposure, especially once Discovery premiered. There's this
yeah,
a returning boom of interest, and there's a
right.
lot. You'll see a lot of cosplayers, and you'll see a lot of merchandise in the vendors' halls. So it's still, but we still have plenty of fan run conventions. Starbase Indy usually has a lot of track presence. Shoreleaf certainly in Maryland. Treklanta, Dragon Con. I mean, out of us really large ones, they have a separate
In Atlanta,
what is
right?
called Trek Track. Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
Garrett Wong is actually director of. So yeah, there's
Okay.
it's a great time to be a Star Trek fan, especially considering the recent news with yet
Oh
another
yeah.
live action series coming on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Picard and Discovery go into the future now. I'm glad we're leaving
And
the
now
prequels
Pike,
behind.
yes,
I'm kind of I have mixed feelings about the Captain Pike thing because only because I'm kind of tired of prequels and I want to move forward, right? And I thought Discovery's twist, time jumping was awesome, and
yeah,
Picard, but I think it could still be really great
it's
because they did
great.
a great job.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I can totally see myself not necessarily keeping track of everything brand new coming out. I mean, we have what 7 6 or 7
It's a new golden
productions.
age
Yeah,
of Trek on TV.
exactly. it's
Yeah,
it's the fact that we have this unbelievable variety where somebody is going to
yeah.
find something, which
A
is what is
cartoon coming
true.
out. Yeah,
Yeah, which is what is true about Legacy Trek. I find. I mean,
yeah.
the old, what is your favorite captain? What is your favorite series? The thing is that
Mhm.
there is a captain, the series, an episode that is a favorite for somebody, that has the meaning for somebody, and then
Right,
it makes it all valid. So it's
right.
fantastic. Like I said, it's a great time to be a fan.
You see, I got my Starfleet Academy shirt on.
Yes.
I got some props in the back through up. So yeah, I'm ready to go. I will say, please check out my previous two quarantine conversation podcasts. I discussed Buddhism, reincarnation, karma, sci-fi, uh, democracy. Is there a modern spiritual crisis? A lot of literary figures. So check those out. So Marina, when I think of Trek, I think of basically it's exploring the final frontier in space while also exploring the final frontier inside the human condition, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I think it's a good way to sum it up. And for me, I don't know about you, Marina, but I've gone through basically three phases as a Star Trek fan. So, and I think a lot of people probably have this a similar type thing that they go through. So when I was younger, I had a more primitive kind of, I liked how it felt, and I liked the cool, effects and stuff like that. And then, I'd say around 2003 when the DVD started first coming out,
Hmm.
the box sets.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really caught on to the sophistication of it and the social commentary. While you were being transported to other worlds, it was really holding a mirror up to this world. And I recognize the legacy of the first interracial kiss on TV and all the commentary that it's done. The progressive commentary. Um, and so that's when and then I went through a third phase more recently where I really got the kind of the humanistic philosophy that comes from Gene Roddenberry and the idea that, obviously the unity and all that, IDIC, all of that, but also kind of humanity has kind of left behind a lot of things. Um, and some people might have a different perspective. But from what I can see and from, the creator's kind of philosophy, that humanity itself has kind of left behind religion and they've embraced science and they're still coming together and there's still unity and all that. But that's kind of another level, another layer that I kind of started noticing. I had like a different kind of awakening as a fan throughout my life, and I've been a lifelong fan. But I think a lot of people have that with Star Trek. What do you think? You kind
Oh,
of when you're younger,
absolutely.
you notice different things, but it's very
Uh,
sophisticated and mature, really.
y-
Uh, you know,
Absolutely. Well, as I said, it's the beauty of Star Trek because it's different things for different people. And in
right,
terms of, I mean, in my personal case, I would probably also have like certain stages of how my fandom developed, if you will.
right.
My family came to the United States in '98, so actually I still caught what is now
Okay.
called the Legacy series, meaning
Where is your family from?
Belarus. That's the
Okay.
westernmost republic of Soviet Union, well,
Okay.
former Soviet Union. The
Oh, nice.
so the yeah, so television. I mean, I caught it almost immediately
Yeah.
from the get go, and it was fascinating. But what's more, like I said, Deep Space Nine. I started saying Deep Space Nine was still last like season and a half probably.
Uh-huh.
Voyager was midway through, and there were constant reruns. PBS had the original series, and I forget which channel was showing TNG all the time. So I had it from like all sides, plus the movies, of course. Now, in my case, I actually cottoned on to the fact that Star Trek was a little bit more than just it's not utopical. It's not utopia really, but this very very hopeful sci-fi.
It's been called that, but people are still
Primarily,
not perfect, you
yeah,
know.
primarily because I saw one of the first movies that I saw, and it was on TV because this is obviously many years after. I saw Star Trek Six, the Undiscovered Country.
I like
Now,
that movie. Yeah.
the fact of the matter is, the first was about 10-15 minutes of the movie was
Uh-huh.
pretty much will be the best word to describe. I was watching. I'm like, this is like watching history because this is what precisely what happened when Chernobyl nuclear station blew up in Soviet Union.
Yes. I've
You
seen
know,
documentary
when
yeah,
they reach out
about
to
that.
the
Yeah.
Klingons and say, "Is everything okay?" and the Klingons
Yes.
say, "Matters of the Klingon Empire do not concern you." It's basically what Soviet Union said when there were indications that something happened badly, but of
Right.
course, there was no diplomatic channels because of
Yes.
Cold War. And I'm looking, I'm like, my God, Klingons are the Soviets, the Federation's obviously United States, the Romulans are the
Well, the
Chinese. It's
Klingons were
all
the Soviets even back in TOS.
yeah,
They were kind of
exactly.
allegorical, you
Exactly.
know,
So
uh,
that part I thought, well, this is fascinating. And I was kind of like on the lookout to see if I will see, sometimes it's very obvious, especially the original series,
yeah.
less abstract than the rest of them. But basically, Star Trek 4, it's save the whales, and
Yeah.
on and on and on. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Great
realistically
Trek has a
speaking,
message. It has depth and substance and
exactly.
even kind of
But
you would say soul to it. Yeah, it's
yeah, but
I love
with
that.
all that, you have to admit that in terms of like being this science fiction that provides this, the concepts, like, well, this is what happens. How do we look at it? Can we come
Right.
up with ideas how to fix it? With all that, Star Trek is not exactly, you wouldn't call it preachy, you wouldn't call it super
No.
serious, because this is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I adore this franchise. It has this ability to not take itself seriously. I mean, think of how many episodes or moments from the movies when you can see that, the characters, basically, they're having fun, they're poking fun at each other. There's something you
Yeah.
literally laugh out loud because something funny, actually funny, happened.
One thing I
And with,
like is the diversity of the episodes. Like
yeah,
in one season of Trek, you can have like a comedy, an all-out comedy, and you can have a courtroom drama, a romance,
yeah,
a pure
absolutely.
adventure. Measure of a Man. How great of an episode was that? I've gotten people that never cared about Star Trek really, really
Yeah,
interested in it by showing them that episode. I
yeah,
mean,
and
that's a
a lot of this stuff, I mean, obviously, as we all know, each series is the product of the moment that it actually was produced, but a
some
lot of the
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
is still valid. It still
A lot
has
of
a
it's
place.
timeless.
I was just talking to
Yeah.
somebody. There's an episode of Voyager called Critical Care, and it's a commentary
Yes.
on the state of healthcare, of the healthcare industry, and it's still valid. It's still, this is what we can apply it, and this was what, 20 years ago.
Yes.
So yeah. So in going back to as far as fandom developed, so that part I was like, okay, I kind of get it. But with all that, I was an armchair fan, meaning like I'm basically just by myself. I didn't really know any other track fans for probably
Right.
about a decade. Now, thankfully, obviously, we're talking basically the first decade of the aughts. Um, Social media started to develop, so that kind of opened up certain avenues. But for the most part, I was reading, I was researching, I was certainly looking up stuff
Right.
online is crazy, trying to kind of, I don't know, uh, keep track of all the actors and anyone that I knew was associated with Star Trek. So I was
Right.
lurking. That's what I think the term is, lurking. I was lurking, and then I went to my first convention, and that brought everything to a whole nother level. So that's when the whole idea of like Star Trek is diverse, that kind of hit me straight in the face, because the number of people, the all the different shapes and sizes and the colors and everything,
Right.
you have to go to a Star Trek convention to really get it. And that part of, probably for me, is probably one of the most important things that in my life, because Star Trek in that regard gave me community. Being from outside the
Yeah.
country, it took a while to kind of get over the all the cultural misconceptions, because coming in, what did I know? I mean, we have exposure to the movies and TV series, but how do you live in America?
Right.
So that kind of like, it made connections, it made me friends, it made me it became part of sort of like making home in this country.
Right. And you hear stories like Martin Luther King convinced Nichelle Nichols to
Yeah.
um, stay on the series. Um, One thing I don't want to make this video too too much in the wheelhouse of some other things I've done as far as on religion because I wanted to kind of reach more people, maybe, you know.
Hmm. Absolutely.
But a thing that people don't commonly know is a lot of people in the civil rights movement were like some of them were communists. A lot of them were like secular people. MLK is the big, head of it. He was a pastor, but a lot of people like J. Anthony Randolph and a lot of others. We go back to W. E. Du Bois. I don't know if you're familiar with these people, but they were
Yes.
secular people, not religious people that were very involved in that, and they were marching. And that's kind of another thing that movement brought together a lot of different diverse people, racially, ideologically, for that, you know, basic human uh, civil rights endeavor. And Trek does something similar, kind of, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a sort of inbuilt respect. Like Kirk says, bigotry does not belong on the bridge. Basically,
Right. Right.
you celebrate the diversity, and you have the respect to different points of view. And of
Right.
course, I mean, we can always discuss, well, how far does it go? Do you accept,
Yeah.
somebody else's opinion, that I should not exist
Right.
as a person, which is a
Right.
horrifying concept. So there's so many further layers and depth into that it's I'm not sure I can quite qualify to be discussing it.
Marina.
But bottom line is, it's something that to strive for, to kind of to try and see other people's viewpoints, and find the
Right.
common ground somehow.
Right. Absolutely. And Marina, I want to go into a couple of like, standout episodes for you that you remembered from the various series. And give me 1 second. I will be right back.
Sure.
We have a noise. Sorry about that, Marina. That was the alarm for you, actually. We had intended this to be later, and forgot to
That
turn the alarm off.
that's all
Um,
right.
well, I'll go first. A couple of episodes that stand out for me. This an origin of Voyager. It had the idea of dinosaurs had left the planet and
Hmm.
they went to the Delta Quadrant. And
Yes.
it's kind of an out there concept, but it really had a lot of commentary about, respecting science because, the I forgot what their names were, but the evolved dinosaur guy, the doctor
Voth.
scientist,
Yeah,
he was
Voth.
basically being persecuted because he had a theory based on good evidence that they were from Earth, right?
Yeah.
And like the people that were in charge, the dogmatic people, they kind of persecuted him and took away his career and livelihood. And I thought that was great. Chakotay's speech in that was great. I mean, I was applauding. Um, Another one from Voyager, the one with the doctor where he's talking to a guy that's supposed to represent like a Nazi doctor that like experimented on people.
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
forget
the
the
one
name.
where the Taurus is hurt and yeah,
Mangala is
yeah,
his name.
that's correct. Yes, yes.
Yes. And man, that was powerful allegory. Um, really. Do you use the research? You know?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, because it can save lives. But do you validating that how it was gotten? The
Yeah.
barbaric means by which that information was gotten. That's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the
Yeah,
thing is that, it's like just to kind of a side note, every single series, even though a lot of people may say, well, let's talk about TNG and Deep Space Nine because they tend to be considered a bit more.
I
Um,
didn't get into
uh,
DS9 till
Voyager,
that was the
Voyager did
last time
have
I ever
several
did.
more than one wonderful episode where you're like,
Oh
I don't
yes.
know what I would have done in this situation.
Yeah, I wish
Um,
Voyager had ended better. But I would have liked to see like a serialized arc to end that like
uh,
DS9, a big epic arc, like 10
yeah.
episodes. But it had a lot of good episodes and a lot
It
of good
kind of
characters.
goes, yeah, it
Seven of
kind of goes
nine,
back to what
Doctor. Yeah,
we talked about in the beginning, where we have the episodic and we have the arcs, so somebody somewhere will find. I mean, I actually I do prefer episodic. So even though I adored Picard, it was,
yeah.
unless you did keep track through the entire thing, I can totally see how somebody else who's totally into episodic only would have been
Hmm.
either confused or not particularly, enamored with having basically a 10-hour long movie, which
Yeah.
is what the entire episode is. Sorry, season is.
Isn't Strange New Worlds gonna supposed to bring back like episodic?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I saw
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah.
that's certainly something to look forward to. Yeah,
I
but
think I like a mix. I want an overall arc, but I like to have like a lot of adventures in between. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's my own personal preference anyway.
Well, I
Um,
get. You know what? I can totally see that they are taking care to develop things
yeah,
carefully, basically. And we're certainly having interesting things happening with Discovery. I am very intrigued by how they're gonna spin the whole thing with this 1,000.
I'm excited. For the first time. I'm really
Yeah.
excited for Discovery. I'm so
Um.
glad that they jumped 1,000 years to the future. I want to
Yeah.
see the future. I want to move forward. I think that's in the nature of Star Trek to move forward. And we've had 20 years of prequels, and they haven't been bad, but I want to move forward. You know what I mean?
Well, it's
Uh,
you want
so
something different, yeah. So that's one of the things
yeah,
where I loved Picard because it was like, what, I feel like because I'm the child
yeah,
of the TNG era,
me
so
too. Me too. I didn't
it's
even watch TOS till like 5 years ago, all the way through. It was
yeah.
never really Star Trek to me, but now I really love it. I think season one of TOS is one of the best seasons of any series. I mean, I love it. There's so much really uh, depth and substance and great writing. But yeah, what are some other episodes, Marina, that you really love?
Well, I always like Death Wish, and this is fairly early on
Which
in
one was that?
Voyager. That's the one where we have the other Q that wants to commit suicide, basically,
Yeah, yeah. Oh
because
yeah. Oh my
and
God, that was
it's
a great one. Yeah, yeah,
and it's different. There are different thoughts. It's like, first of all, if you consider the Q themselves, like it's kind of hard to actually to understand. I mean, to be
right.
a creature that where they basically they've reached the end of the evolution. They cannot change anymore. That's what they're all powerful. They can do everything. They can go anywhere. So but they can't die. and
Hmm.
that's the kicker. And then of
That was
course
such
it
a
kind
great
of it kind
episode.
of the other
Uh,
side of it is that, of course, is that, if a person wants to commit suicide, how do you handle it, legally and all that other thing. So it's the human side, and it's a more conceptual side of like what
yeah.
it's like to be a god, basically.
Uh,
uh,
right. I love Q. I want to see him come back somehow. I met
uh
John Delancey. He's pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they're all amazing. Death Wish is actually one of Kate Mulgrew's favorite episodes. She spoke about it several times
Uh,
during conventions, where, yeah, if you don't have the point of where your life ends, is there a meaning
right.
to your life? And so, yeah, it's great stuff. And of course, I mean, we can always bring up Tuvix, which is still to this day,
You
it's a
could keep
highly.
going and going, Marina. There's so many of
Oh yeah,
them.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. So, and then
absolutely. That
and
was
that's
great.
just Voyager. I mean, we have look. I mean, look at T,
Season,
and of
just
course
season
Deep Space
two.
Nine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
DS9 had great like epic battles and their great serialization, and that was the last I really got into. I didn't get it at first, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. They don't get it. DS9. And
Yeah,
I kind of didn't like how they went so deep into religion. I know it was the Bajorans, but to me it seemed kind of off to what kind of Gene Roddenberry was about and how he kind of envisioned things. It didn't really violate anything. It wasn't humanity, but the way they gave so much attention to that and maybe kind of validity to that. I don't. That was their own. Iris. What's his name? Iris Even
Stephen
Bear.
Bear. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they were doing their own thing. And the prophets. They were really non-linear. Wormhole aliens. But it had a lot of layers, and I'm a big fan of DS9. I would put it up there. Tied with TNG and Voyager. For me, is the best series overall for different
Well,
reasons. Each of them.
they are my favorite as well, like Voyager and the Next Generation. But I do respect the rest of the series. Even, I have to
They're all
admit that, for
good,
instance,
really. Even
Enterprise
Enterprise was
never
decent.
caught me. I
Yeah.
barely made it through, and I didn't. I have to admit, I'm not a completist. I never finished Enterprise. I will at some point. I just
Oh,
don't
you
want.
didn't?
No, as a matter of fact, somebody I had I was a guest on Trek Profiles podcast, and
Okay.
I said, I thought about it because I know quite a few people who
Marina,
made it a
watch
point.
season 4. It's very good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
And
it's
there's a lot
it's.
of tying
I
into the
I
rest of
I
the universe.
know about that. I've met. I mean, I've
Yeah.
met pretty much everyone from all nearly all series at this point. So I'm like, you know what? If only
Right.
because of that, I'd like to know what everything is. I just don't want to become a chore. And I told that John on Trek Profiles. Like, if it once it becomes the chore, it loses the joy. And Star Trek is joy for me. So once I'm due a entire rewatch actually of both Deep Space Nine and the original series,
Yeah.
sort of like start from, and I probably will do that, sometime this summer, because everything else, I just rewatched Picard just because, I mean, obviously we all have plenty of time right now.
How many
So,
times have you watched Picard over?
well, I watched obviously everything when once it was premiering, and then I did a complete rewatch, like I said, just very
I think
recently, a
I've
couple of
watched
weeks
every
ago.
episode like 4 times probably. I was so excited for that for months and like everybody. When they
I
when they showed up at Comic-Con and people went nuts when they
Yes.
showed that.
Well, I
Um,
was I was at New York Comic Con when they premiered the. Well, I mean, they premiered it at San Diego, and then they did the same thing
you
at
were
New
at
York
San
Comic Con.
Diego?
No, not San Diego, but I
Okay.
did manage to get a spot at New York Comic Con
Knew
panel
you.
for that.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And
They
oh
had
my
a new trailer
God,
for. Yeah, yeah. Oh man,
the screaming in the theater
yeah.
when, I mean, first
I
of
would
all,
have
when
been too. That
Kravchuck
was.
came out, and then of course he said, let's look at it. And apparently San Diego had some sort of technical snafu, so they had to show it second time because of something with the sound. And he said,
Huh.
well, because San Diego got to see it twice, you get to see it twice. And they started rolling it again, and people like literally sitting there like shaking because it was so exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that regard, I mean, I have to say, if you get to go to conventions, just go, because you get to experience some pretty unique things. I was
Yeah,
there in
I'm near the
Vegas.
Nashville area, and they used to have them like every year, and now
Yeah.
nothing. I have no idea if they're ever going to come back. I hope
Well,
so.
I kind of hope. I maybe it's a hopeless hope, but I do hope that something
Well, it makes
once.
sense. It's so big right now. There's
Yeah.
so many
Oh
shows.
gosh.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
there
Now's the
are
time.
the especially San Diego and New York Comic Con. They basically they're the kind of it feels almost like they're on the edge of how many more people can you possibly accommodate, because we're talking over hundreds. The range is right now, I think, between 165,000 to 180,000 people over a 4 day period. That's enormous. That's the two largest events in the world.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. I mean, right now in New York Comic Con, actually, they have Javits Convention Center, and they have
Mm.
3 or 4 other facilities that they kind of forced to use for like industry panels or any kind of special events because they can no longer fit everyone in Javits. Especially right now, they have construction going on. They're trying to
Mm-hmm.
expand the size of the building, so they have to kind of rearrange where the artist gallery will go and
Yeah.
all that. But yeah, but as far as conventions, you do get to experience, the sort of like, do you remember where you were when this happened? Like
Yeah.
when Patrick Stewart came out in Vegas suddenly out
Yeah.
of
I can
nowhere and said
imagine.
Picard is
Yeah.
back. I was there. I mean, literally, we brought down the roof. There was an
I'm
unbelievable
envious of
moment.
you. That must have been so cool.
Yeah, my
Um,
sister unfortunately missed it. We traveled together to that particular Vegas, and she was elsewhere. And she's like, who could have thunk, and don't miss the
yeah.
moment.
And I'm worried about Sir Patrick Stewart because of his age and the coronavirus. And I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
coronavirus,
Well,
I,
pretty much most of the folks who are, they're all in that group, which is why people are concerned that, how are we going to do conventions? But
yeah,
right now, I'm sitting back. I'm like, let's get through this situation, and then we'll figure out
yeah,
how do we have to do conventions differently, how differently, and what it's going to entail.
right.
Uh,
Marina, another thing I love about Trek is it's so based on real science. It's not fantasy.
oh yes.
And I think they've always had like science advisors.
Mm-hmm.
Andre Bormanis
Barmanis,
was
yes.
a big one. And Lawrence Krauss, he wrote the physics of
Yes.
Star Trek,
Mm-hmm.
that book
I
right
had
there.
I had the pleasure of meeting him. Yes, and right now they have.
He's actually agreed to come on my podcast
Oh,
at some
that's
point in June,
cool.
so that's gonna be cool. Yeah.
That's
Um,
fantastic. Yeah, and they do have great scientists right now advising both Dr.
um,
Mohammed Noor, he's the professor of biology at Duke, and
cool.
Dr. Erin McDonald. She has a PhD in astrophysics. They both have been announced as consultants to the
Yeah.
franchise because now that we're not talking about specific series, it's all part of rebranded Star Trek universe. So they're
Yeah.
consulting overall, and that's fantastic. I had the pleasure of meeting both the conventions. I mean, these are real scientists who are, you know,
Yeah.
uh,
It
dyno-bull
Trek has
Trekkies.
inspired so much science, flip
Yeah,
phones, tablets, and inspired so many scientists and engineers and
absolutely.
philosophers. It's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. Well, Marina, I'm not sure what your personal philosophy is about life and the world. I know I believe I know you live in New York, right?
Yeah, in New Jersey, but I work in the city. So, I mean, right
Okay.
now, obviously not, but I work from home. But yeah,
Yeah.
I live in Jersey, work in the city.
So people that know me and my content and stuff, they know I'm a big fan of Steven Pinker, and I noticed that
Hmm.
you went to his lecture he gave and you got a signed book and all that. So are you a fan of his work and basically his kind of like view on things, which is also another big inspiration to me. Uh, what's your view on that? On like basically just the Enlightenment, um, secular humanism, because it really seems like that's the ethos
Yes,
of Trek
I
overall.
I do consider myself a humanist. I'm
Yeah.
not religious. I have to admit that. Um,
Oh, me
I
as well. And if you watch my videos on my channel or read
yeah,
my book that I published,
yes.
that very much so. So yeah,
So in terms of that, I mean, I graduated. I have a degree in statistics and mathematics. So as
yeah,
far as sciences are concerned, I've always been interested in, and I continuously so because I don't have that much time actually to go back and do something else academically, to be honest. But having an opportunity to actually go, that's one of the best parts of being next to New York City because something always happens here.
I imagine.
Having
Yeah,
have an opportunity to be exposed to all these amazing scientists and authors,
right.
talking about how, trying to work out how the world works.
Yeah,
Um, that for
and
me is
being
very
exposed to all
important.
kinds of different people and
Yes,
cultures,
absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
sure it's enlightening.
It's
And
part of all this. So I suppose it's a little bit like a little bit of this, a little bit of that in my case, because I do appreciate astronomical presentations that they give at Museum of Natural History, but I also like dinosaurs, and I also like a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
yeah,
But for me, that's
I
part
love
of.
people that are curious about the world, that
Yes,
want to learn,
that's
that are
exactly
not
it. Well,
dogmatic and have predetermined conclusions and work backwards to get to those conclusions. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I
and it's
I
because the
we need
more
more
you
people like.
it's the Aristotelian paradox of knowledge. The more you know, the more you know that you don't know. The more questions are raised, the further the horizon
Socrates said,
stretches.
the more, all I know is I don't know anything or something to that
Yes,
effect.
exactly. That's
Uh,
exactly it. So in my case, something pops up and I start looking. I'm like, well, great. Now I know a little bit of this, and it's probably going to take me elsewhere. Most recent thing, I took part of a webinar about history of tea, and I thought this is fascinating. Like it's
I,
such
I
a
love to learn
common.
about like sugar and pepper and tea and how
Yes,
important it was that people
I,
killed
I,
over it.
I yeah, so I
Yeah,
just bought a couple of books on the subject matter because I want to find out
yeah.
more. And yeah, so all these little nuggets, they lead you out someplace else, and you learn more and you know
They
more. And
expand they enrich your view of the
absolutely,
world.
yeah,
Even mundane things have a story behind them, and it's all connected. It's like this big tapestry of stories that are all interconnecting.
yes,
It's pretty awesome. It
and
basically
and
it's
it's
like
it's
it's like seeing the world in HD and stop when you were seeing it like in standard definition, kind of.
yeah.
So
Yes,
yeah.
and of course we're talking about like things and concepts, but behind all of that, you know other people.
Mm.
Again, coming from a different country, there's things that I never considered. That I will be friends with people that come from very different paths of life, where they're both personally, professionally, and of course culturally. That part is probably one of the biggest things that
Well, if you go to
coming to
like the
America
large,
gave me.
yes, yes. Well, if you go to like the Large Hadron Collider in Europe, you see all these scientists from all these different countries. It's a common human enterprise, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, we have a common humanity.
yes. Oh,
We share spaceship Earth.
yes,
Um,
exactly. And it's like you said, when it's a common endeavor.
yeah,
I always find it deeply ironic when we hear all the political things, especially considering that there's practically another Cold War with Russia brewing right now. And then in the same vein, they will be bringing up something happening on the space station and something happening, and that's where like this with Russians, because the scientists and the astronauts,
they don't.
engineers,
Yeah, yeah,
that's not even a parameter that they consider, because it's not important.
right.
For them, it's going out there, and as basically that's our final frontier at the moment right now, the space.
Absolutely. Um, Going back to the humanism thing, Gene Roddenberry
Was a
won
humanist.
Humanist of the Year,
Yeah.
91, close to before he died, tragically. I think it was 91. I think Isaac Asimov was like came before him or after him, something like that.
Yeah.
And John Delancey, he was part of the openly secular movement. I don't know if you know about that. I
Yes.
went to I went to Washington D.C. for the Reason rally in 2016. He was a speaker there, so
Hmm.
yeah,
Oh,
that was pretty cool.
he is excellent. He did they actually did it twice, so they basically have an opportunity for everyone to see it during the Star Trek cruise this year. He held the presentation, a play that was written based on the scripts from the Dover trial. From
Yes, I heard about that.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Oh,
let me tell you, I didn't know what it was going to be. Is it going to be a bit too dry? I mean, we're talking about an entertainment cruise, and you have a fairly serious, thematically very serious play, and it was brilliant. It was him. It was about 10, I'm going to say, but yeah, 8, 10 other Star Trek actors.
yeah,
And they actually asked for volunteers among fans. I mean, before the cruise started, so they have to actually prepare how to, it was a play reading, not like a play with full production.
right.
10 other fans, and it was a huge success. The main theater, I mean, the equivalent of main theater on board, was pretty full both times, as far as I know. And a lot of people asking questions. I mean, that's something to be said about Star Trek fans, is that folks are, on average, you pretty
Yeah,
smart.
yep. I agree. Yeah, definitely. Marina, what's the Star Trek cruise like? I-
You know
I'm
what?
curious.
I found it very. For me, this was the first time. It was the first time a Star Trek cruise, because before I could never make it. They used to have it in January, and that's just not
Yeah,
something that I could swing time wise.
doesn't it depart from like Miami?
Yeah,
Or
yes, yes.
yeah,
So they
okay.
moved it. They moved it to March, which finally made it possible for me to even consider it.
Mhm.
And it's a first-time cruise overall. I've never done any other kind of cruises like on a large actual cruise liner.
Mhm.
So for me, it was an interesting thing, because the Star Trek part of it was absolutely tremendous. They had phenomenal programming. The folks who were actually running the show, the panels that they came up with, it's less than no, I'm saying it incorrectly. It's different from a conventional convention, if you will.
Mm,
A typical convention has, yes, it has presentations, it has some sort of shows, perhaps exhibits, and you have traditionally panels, the Q&As. The
mm,
actors come out by themselves, duos, groups, whatever, and they're either hosted, and the attendees have a chance to ask questions. We did have that on the cruise, but there is an additional component to that where the actors are actually expected to do something. It's part of this whole thing. Like, are you gonna perform? Is it going to be a concert? Are you going to do a reading like John Delancey did the Dover play? Sorry, the Dover
right,
trial play. Or are you going to do a comedy show? Garrett Wang did a phenomenal. It was hilarious. Nana Visitor did a cooking
right.
show. So there is that unconventional part of it where there is
That was interesting.
you have a show, you have a game, you have a concert, that sort of thing. So
Right.
that part I was thrilled about. There are some logistical things that they have to work through because this was a different ship. They moved to a different line and a larger ship. So
Hmm.
some of the things like organizing queues for the photo ops and autographs, that was not particularly pleasant. It was very lengthy,
Hmm.
very circuitous way how they had to handle the crowds just lining up through the ship basically. But
Yeah.
as far as the treks are fantastic. I discovered that I'm not a cruiser, so that besides the
Really,
point, like I'm like, you know
not
what,
your
I
thing.
yeah, I like going out to whatever the hosting city is and checking out galleries
Yeah.
and museums, or going somewhere, maybe different
Have
places.
you have you traveled a lot?
I try, and a lot of it, like a majority of my travel has been connected to conventions, which makes
Okay.
it part of this whole, like,
But
yes,
you've been to Europe,
yes, I've been
London.
to England several times, and
Yeah.
I've been to Czech Republic. I did have plans to do more traveling. Unfortunately, well, right after 2009 happened, which
Yeah.
is when I finally had a very stable job, and I had the opportunity to spend some of the income on traveling.
Right.
Things didn't happen because the prices for the airlines just went completely crazy, so that kind of curtailed everything. But I started going more to conventions, so inside the United States and inside just generally North America. I mean, I've gone to Canada, Montreal Comic Con, and Denver, San Jose, and it's fun because it kind of becomes part of the exploration. Yes, I get to go to the city and check out a new convention,
Yeah.
or visit something that I already gone to because I really enjoyed it, and I know, and I'll have friends in the area, and I get to do something else. I always try to have like a little bit, like half a day or a day to myself, to take a tour of the city, go to a museum, that sort of thing.
Yeah. There's a great quote by Mark Twain about travel. It makes you more mature. It
Yes.
makes you expands your horizons and your view of the world. I've lived in Central America for several years, and I've traveled to Japan. I fortunately got to do that. It definitely does. It
Yeah.
definitely expands your outlook. It's another one
Absolutely.
of those things that factors into like switching your mind from SD to HD, kind of,
Yeah.
seeing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Marina, getting into a little bit of, I guess, controversial for a wider audience type of topic. What do you think about science versus faith?
Uh, you know what? It's a difficult one. As I said, being non-religious, I do
Yeah,
find plenty of issues with
yeah.
just blindly following a dogma. At the
Well,
same
isn't
time, I'm
science?
fully aware and that a lot of people who do believe, who do have faith, it's their right, and
Yeah.
it's their way
Oh,
to
sure. Yeah,
how they relate to the world. That's
yeah.
um,
But when
but
people are indoctrinated and so many people have never even thought about so many things, and that's
yes,
something I find in my life. So many people have never thought about
same
so
thing.
many.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and especially when it comes to the point of, like, it's one thing when you're indoctrinated and at some point your eyes do open, but
yeah,
in cases of willful ignorance, it's doubly horrible because it's the person that basically rejects the opportunities, the possibilities. So
yeah,
as far as public life is concerned, yeah, we
yeah.
need science. We cannot exist science, or
Of
or whatever
course,
else
we need
other
another
way.
Carl Sagan to kind of get that message out. We have some. We have Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye
Yeah.
and several people. I
Yeah,
miss Carl
and
Sagan though.
that's one of the other things is that well, Neil deGrasse is he's the director at the Rose Planetarium
I
in New
met
York.
him
So
in
I
a
had a chance
conference.
to see him more than once. He usually does
Yeah,
yearly reviews in science, if you will.
yeah.
So and it's just basically all the big stories that accumulate over the previous year. And I have to tell you, if you're ever in the city and you have a chance to actually go see him do
I want to
that,
go to New York
it's
so bad. That's one
oh
place I haven't been, and I want to go.
well, right now the
Uh,
place is rather odd to be, as you can imagine,
I
because
imagine.
everything
Yeah,
is
yeah.
closed, and I haven't.
You ever seen the movie Vanilla Sky with Tom
No, no,
Cruise?
but I heard about it.
It's
Yes.
it's one of my favorite movies, but it's about cryogenics basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like Tom Cruise is in the middle of Times Square and it's empty. They emptied
Yes.
it out. I imagine it's
Uh,
not maybe something kind of like that.
I
Uh,
had I like normally if the typical routine for me would have been get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to the city, work, and then come back.
yeah,
And of course that hasn't happened. I mean, as a matter of fact, today, hold on, today is the 16th, right? So today is day
yeah,
70 of my well, semi quarantine, because I do have I can't get out and go grocery shopping, but it's the
yeah.
day 70 of this rather strange existence. And I haven't been to the city since February. Well,
Wow.
actually, let me rephrase that. I did have one trip because I had to go to a doctor. I had a doctor's appointment because before they shut down all the offices and everything. And it was already, this is early April, I'm going to say, or end of March. And it was highly unpleasant experience
Mhm.
because, yeah, you do get some people on the streets, all the shops, all the stores, everything's closed.
Yeah,
And it kind of feels like a zombie movie because you come closer to the
that's what I
person
was thinking. This is
and
like a
we'll go,
zombie movie.
yeah, and everybody just kind of just rushes it to the
Yeah,
side because you don't want to even go up too close to a person.
yeah. Well, one thing with me about going back to the science and faith thing is science is really it's systematic doubt,
Yeah,
basically, you know? And faith is kind of a poison to that. Because science can't have any like goals that it's working towards as far as a conclusion. You know, it's systematic doubt. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like contrary to faith, right? And the only authority in science is the evidence, you know?
yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, scientists try to prove established theories wrong all the time. They encourage heresy, kind of. You know what I mean? And that's how they move forward. And only science has ever disproved science, you know, better science. And science keeps making all these discoveries. And something like religion, you know, it hasn't really discovered anything or proven any of its claims or really, in my opinion, done that much to better people's lives, especially when you look at all of it through history. It's kind of a horror story in a lot of ways. Um, and to me, I can't help but juxtapose that, say a terrorist bombing or something, with the Starship Enterprise. Humanity's come together and we're exploring the stars and we're out. Gene Roddenberry said, you know, humanity is kind of still in its infancy and we're kind of growing up and maturing. I kind of think that's true, you know? And to me, my book was called A Justified Faith, and the faith was in humanity based on the evidence of the overall arc from cave dwellers to space explorers, you know, through
yeah,
doing that, not through like something like, you know, blood magic, but through the application of knowledge
yeah,
and coming together and finding out so much what you would call evil comes from ignorance, you know, wrong
yeah,
diagnosis, wrong conclusions based on the wrong diagnosis for things. So yeah, that's my take on it. And when I see something like you know, scripture, holy scripture, if you're not a part of the club, you're going to go to hell and burn forever. That to me is a big it impedes the unity that Trek is about. You can't have unity when you're part of something that has that foundational. You're going to burn forever if you don't believe what I believe. And I'm not saying that, you know, all religions are like, all people like. A lot of people aren't. Most people maybe aren't, and in the West anyway nowadays. But it's still there. It's part of the tradition and part of the books, right?
yeah,
So it's disturbing to me, really, you know, and I think it's I want to move forward from that. I don't even want to talk about it anymore, but I have to talk about it a lot because I care about the world and I'm a thinker. I'm a deep thinker, and that this is something that's still very much in the world, you know, and a lot of people believe it and they try to pass laws and affect people's civil rights based on it. Homosexuals still, there are people that are non-believers that get hacked to pieces in like Indonesia that are bloggers, and It's sad. We made so much progress in every, back to Pinker's work in every way, but we got work to do
Yeah,
still. I think
a
Star
lot of
Trek
work.
is a great, it may not be identical, we may not be able to travel faster than light. It doesn't seem we can. Maybe warp drive is a kind of a thing that'll let us, through a wormhole or something, get beyond that barrier of Einstein. But a lot of things could be. I think if we keep going on the right track, then we're gonna get there.
Yeah,
Something like it. You know what I mean?
that's what Star Trek is. It's hope.
Yeah, I agree. And Marina, I wanted to close by reading a quick dialogue from one of my favorite episodes from the original series. It's from the episode "Who Mourns for Adonis."
Hmm.
Great episode.
Yes.
Love that episode. And so basically, this is kind of a statement of what Trek was about and about kind of humanism and human unity. So you remember that Palamas was a female officer,
Hmm.
and she said, talking to Kirk, she said, "I have a message for you. He wants us to live in peace. He wants to provide for us. He'll give us everything we ever wanted." And then Kirk says, "Accept him, and you condemn us all to slavery, nothing less than slavery. Or perhaps the thought of spending an eternity bending knee and attending sheep appeals to you." And then Kirk says, "Give me your hand. We're the same. We share the same history, the same heritage, the same lives. We're tied together beyond any untying. Man or woman, it makes no difference. We're human. We couldn't escape each other even if we tried or wanted to." I lost my. Oh no. So we couldn't escape each other even if we wanted to. That's how you do it, Lieutenant, by remembering who and what you are. A bit of flesh and blood afloat in a universe without end. And the only thing that's truly yours is the rest of humanity. That's where your duty lies.
Yeah.
Isn't that a beautiful piece of writing?
Yes.
And it
Absolutely.
really encapsulates everything that Trek is about, I think, or its highest values. And where I hope humanity keeps going and keeps recognizing more and more.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Hope. Hope.
yeah, that's part of what Trek means to me. It's deep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Marina, thank you so much
Thank you.
joining me. I think this was a great podcast, Trek centric episode. I'm gonna leave a link in the description to my other quarantine conversations.
Hmm.
And Marina, I hope we get to go out, go back to conventions. Maybe I'll meet you at one at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and keep on rocking. Well, thank you again, Marina. I hope you have a great
Thank
weekend, and thank you for being on.
thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.